All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do something today with the LEDiva. Basically, I just got the boards in for the Rev A, which has some of the breakout pins for doing programming, so I don't have to remove the AT-Tiny85 anymore. I'm going to solder up one of them right now, and so you can kind of see how it all goes together. So let me switch to my overhead camera. All right, so here is the new board that I just got from OSH Park. You can see I didn't quite label it as well as I probably should have, because I've been designing this board so I know where all the pins are going to go and what all the components are. So as you can see, I've got the two breakouts for the color and mode buttons. I also have a breakout for charger, which is something that I put back into the chip after I removed earlier. I have my switch, a sensor. This is for the AT-Tiny85. These are my program breakout pins, so 6 pins. And then these 3 are for the NeoPixels. On the other side, I do have the connection for the battery, and also a small connection for surface mount resistor, which is part of the sensor. So let's go ahead and start soldering it together. I'll show you the components I'm going to be using. So here is the AT-Tiny85. Here is the NeoPixel connector that I've been using. It's a little bit bigger than a JST connector, and it has a locking pin. Here is the JST connector. This is exactly the same one that Adafruit I get from Adafruit, and it's the same ones they use. Then also from Adafruit, I have the, I believe this is the fast vibration sensor. I've got 2 buttons. I've been trying to figure out which would be the best buttons to use. These are ones that I get a whole bunch of from Adafruit, and they do a pretty good job. And then lastly, I have my power switch. This is a latching push button switch that I've sourced off of Mauser. It's pretty cheap. I think they're about 50 cents each, so much cheaper than the other ones I was using. Oh, and then one other thing, I do have my small surface mount resistors. These are 10K resistors, so I only need one of those, and that's actually where I'm going to start with soldering. So let me put these over to the side. And I am just going to go ahead and use my very small tweezers to pull out one of these and get it all ready to install on the board. So before that gets installed, I do want to put in a little bit of solder onto the board on one pad. And that's going to let me very easily solder one side. Of that resistor. I did realize that I probably made these pads a little too close together for the resistor that I'm using. So that's probably something I'm going to want to change. Yep, I can do a better job than that. I want this to lay as flat as possible. And then that leaves me just a little bit of room. Yeah, I mean, ideally, I would want these pads to extend enough to where I can get a good bead of solder all the way around it. Let's see. Can't really tell. Looks like that has gotten some solder, yeah. So that is connected. Excuse me. Right, next I'm going to connect the NeoPixel connector. Now, I do have, it does mate up with these connectors. Sorry, that's a little difficult to see. It does mate up with these connectors that I've been adding to NeoPixels. I do know that that pin there is ground, and I just want to make sure this is going to get oriented correctly. So yes, so that's going to connect. That is my ground, so this is going to get connected this way. And I'm just going to double check again. Yep, so that's going to connect in there. For that. Now I'm going to go ahead and install my vibration sensor. I'm also going to heat up my hot glue gun because that vibration sensor should be secured down with just a little bit of heat. So I'm also going to bend this leg at a 90-degree angle so that it'll go into the board nicely. So I put the very fine wire in there first, and then the thicker wire. I'm going to put a little bit of solder on the thicker wire to tack it into place, and then I'm going to rotate it so that it sits with that orientation. Now I can go back in and do the thinner wire. I'm going to do the thinner wire on both sides just because these thin wires have a habit of breaking rather easily. So that's done. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the switch. It's going to go in like that. I did leave this a pretty generic switch pad, so you can put in the typical type of switch, like the sliding switch or these push button switches. I've gotten a lot of people who want to do sculpture work, and for them it's a little easier to do the slide switches, but for wearable stuff I found doing the push button switches actually makes it easier because I can put this under a piece of clothing or something, and then I just kind of mash it to turn it on, mash it to turn it off. I'm just gonna fold those pins in just a bit. Let's see, so next I think I'm gonna solder on that battery JST connector. So I'm just going to start by tinning the one pin. Actually, I'm going to get my helping hand now. And so I'm just going to tack on that one side first. And these are just structural, so they kind of help hold that JST connector down to the board. Now that that's done, I can go ahead and solder the actual leads in there. There we go. It's in there pretty nicely. And I'm going to just trim up some of these connectors. So I can trim that up. Actually, I'm going to get rid of that little sphere of solder. Get rid of that leg. Let me trim up some of these switches, switch legs, trim up some of the NeoPixel legs as well. Now I do want to install some wires for the buttons. I have the blue and green buttons, so I'm going to grab some blue and green hookup wire from here. I'm not going to make these terribly long buttons, but I did kind of leave these spaces for the buttons so that you can attach buttons directly to the board. But I figured it's better to have holes so that you can, I think for most projects, people are going to want to put these buttons somewhere else. So I did leave that option. So I've got my blue and green wires here. Take my wire stripper. I'm going to strip those wires. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in my helping hand. I'm also going to tin these wires real quick. All right, so those are tinned, and let's see, now I just want to make a decision which wires I want to have indicating different colors. I think I'm going to have blue be mode and green be color. Right, so I'm going to just feed those mode or pattern wires in. And now I'm doing the color selection buttons or button. All right. Almost in there. And when I've been doing this, what I've noticed really kind of makes things go faster rather than cutting those into two wires. I just cut out twice the length of what I need and then fold them up, solder each of the ends of those wires in place so that it basically just makes a large loop. And then I just basically cut in the middle of the loop, and then I have the two wires going out. These do use a common ground for the buttons, but I did break it off so that it uses two holes for the ground, because I don't know. I mean, you could want to have your mode and color buttons right next to each other, but you could want your mode and color buttons far away. So I wanted to give as much options as possible. So I'm just going to fold that wire in half and clip it. Do the same for the mode. And strip the ends. That one didn't do too well. Sometimes you get a little piece of the wire casing stuck in it and it doesn't strip as well. All right. So let me just tin those wires. I am going to trim these up just a little bit. And then I'm going to solder them to the different buttons. Now I've folded over the tabs. These are breadboard mountable buttons. But I have folded over the tabs because that makes them a little more streamlined. It doesn't matter which end I solder to which here. And then I do that, and then I can just put a dab of hot glue right on there. And that will actually just make, it'll insulate, but it'll also really secure that wire to the top of the button there. All right, now I'm gonna set up this other button. The color button. Again, I'm going to tin this wire up. Or tin this button and its pads. And then solder my color select wires. Put a little blob of hot glue, and now my buttons are all sealed. So there is one other thing I do want to add here. I do want to add a JST connector to the charger port. So this is just going to be a JST connector. And shoot, I had one here just a minute ago. So yeah, I want to add a JST connector so that I can hook a charger up to this thing pretty easily. I just recently pulled a bunch of connectors from a Roomba. Here it is. That all had the same ones that are used by these batteries. So I'm gonna clip that. This one is already connected, so that should work just fine. I'm just gonna strip these. All right, these wires are a little tricky. There we go. All right. So one thing I do want to make sure is that the polarity is correct on these. Yep. All right. So that's correct. Black is ground. Green is positive on here. And luckily I have my board marked with the appropriate ones. This wire is a little thick for the holes that I have on the board. Make sure this is twisted nice and tight. Feed these through. All right. Now I'm just gonna solder those in place. So I'm doing all of the connectors and passive components before I actually add the AT-Tiny85. It's mostly so that in case I get a little too crazy with my soldering or to desolder anything, I'm not gonna at least overheat the chip. So that looks pretty good. I am gonna kind of open that a little bit and put just a tiny dab of hot glue down and then push it down into there so that should hold it in place so it doesn't get a lot of wear or get snagged on anything. And now I'm ready to add the chip. So what's really different than the other prototypes of the LEDiva that I've been doing, this has the breakout for programming, so I don't need to put in the little connector, the IC connector that I have been putting in before. I am going to solder this ATtiny85 directly to the board. So once I solder this on there, there is no removing this easily anyways. So this is commitment right here. So now I'm going to solder those legs. I do have the chip orientation marked on the board so that I know which way it's going to get oriented. All right, and that looks pretty good. Let me just make sure all of my connections look good. So yeah, everything looks nice. What I want to do now is go ahead and flash the bootloader and do the first program on it. Load the main program. So this is one thing that I think I do need to change with the next version. I do have the breakout pins, but I haven't marked which one is ground. Now I can look at it and I can see, because I'm using a ground plane, I can see that this pin over here at the end is the ground. So I know I can set this in here. I didn't have any of the 6-pin housings. I just had 5, so I have this one over here. So that connects up to there, and then I have my programmer. So this should allow me to flash the board. Let me switch views so that we can see the Arduino IDE and how that's going to get flashed, and you'll probably see the buttons kind of going off. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and make sure everything's selected. So I have the Arduino selected, ATtiny85, 8 megahertz internal. And first of all, I'm going to burn the bootloader. So now we see our lights flashing there, and it's done burning bootloader. And now I have my LEDiva code here. This is the default code with all the modes. I'm going to go ahead and upload. And now we got our lights blinking, so it's uploading. Now, I've got this code up to 95% of the storage capacity for the chip. All right, still uploading, and looks like it's done uploading. So what that means is now I should be able to take my test strip here. Let me switch back to just the overhead. So I should be able to take my test NeoPixel strip here and connect up to the LEDiva. I'm also going to take a battery pack that I have here. I'm going to connect that battery. I did see something flick, and this should start up with the default All right, so let's see. Getting a flicker. So it is getting power. Wonder why that's not working. Let me try getting, so I did make some changes to the code. Let me try just uploading the old version. All right. So I'm gonna open LEDiva. This is the last known working version. Let me go ahead and put that over here. Let me just make sure this is the one. Before. Oh, yeah, all right. So I'm gonna bring up another one that I was working on this weekend that I know is working. All right, so this one should work just fine. So once again, I'm gonna go ahead and connect up my programmer and flash this one. Let's see. Looks like it's uploading. Still uploading, and looks like it's done. All right, so now go ahead and hook it back up. Oh, yep, so that is working. So it looks like I just have a little bit of a problem with my code. It's kind of hard to see that. So let me go back to this camera so you can see that this is on. Go back to my overhead. I'm going to change my camera just a little bit. So hopefully we can see a bit better. I'm gonna adjust my colors here. Whoa. All right, let me actually turn off some of these lights. Okay, so yeah, you can see that a little better. I know it's a little hard to tell, but that's green. So what I'm going to do is start changing the color. So if I press and hold this button, let's see. So yeah, actually, so that changed the mode. Let's see if the motion feedback is working. Yep, so that blinks faster when I do that. Let's see, so there is rainbow. This is what I call the rave mode. So every time you tap it, it switches colors as it pulsates. And then we go back to solid color. And then here is the color mode select. Along with doing color and mode select, what I've also done is set it up so that this will allow you to add or remove colors along with adjusting the brightness. So it's maybe hard to see, but I am actually adjusting the brightness of these LEDs by pushing either one of these buttons to go up or down. And then once I let them go for a second, it's going to go back to its normal. And I've just set the ceiling or the max brightness for those. So now if I turn it off and then press and hold this button, let's see, should, oh, maybe it's this button. The other one, this should, all right, so this affects brightness. And this one is going to let me add the number of LEDs. Oh, you know, sorry, this is a special program that I wrote which locks out the ability to change LEDs because we knew how many LEDs we were going to have in the project. But normally you can add or subtract LEDs from here up to 100. But anyways, I mean, this chip works. I just need to tweak the programming a little bit. So the next step is going to be to go with the smaller surface mount AT-Tiny 85 so that we can make this a little bit smaller. And now that I know that the external programming is working, I feel confident in doing that. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching.